Now, I've got to touch on this light rail business case that's just been released. I mean, I've been saying all along that this whole thing was a vanity exercise by Shane Rattenbury and Andrew Barr. It was never necessary. 27 cents of the dollar return on investment is just unsustainable, Tamus.
I'm still reading the business case, Stephen, and it makes a lot of very, very interesting points about the costs that it takes to deliver, but also what it will deliver once it's constructed. Business case like this is going to be expensive. I don't think a vanity project. It is part of the vision that the Labor Party has gone to 3 elections with about a city-making project and has won those 3 elections, and a key part of that has been the light rail.
But Deb, we're having the same debate at a federal level at the moment. No election is a referendum on any single policy issue. So suggest that Labor has won 3 elections off the back of light rail, I think, is a furphy. The last election was, and full credit to you, but the last election they won was because you guys didn't put up a credible opposition. It had nothing to do with light rail.
Well, I think when you look at this business case, Stephen, you can see why the Labor government fought so hard to keep it buried. And it was only because of the decision of a legal arbiter that we've got this information brought to light and the pressure from the Canberra Liberals and Leanne Castley. And regardless of what any Canberran thinks of light rail as a mode of transport, Canberrans do need to ask whether the cost is something that we can sustain going into the future. If you look at the budget, we're already in $9 billion worth of debt, and deficit is at $1.2 billion. We'll see how those figures compare in the budget that's handed down next month. So is this a cost that we can sustain when we're seeing emergency appropriations to keep our hospital running? We're seeing frontline resources being drained. We're seeing the ACT government claw back revenue from Canberrans who are doing it really tough just so that they can plug holes in their budget. So in going forward into the future, these are difficult questions that we need to ask ourselves.
See, Tamus, I don't have a problem with light rail in and of itself. I actually think it's great technology, but I've never caught the light rail because I live in Belconnen, and of course that's the forgotten part of Canberra that the government doesn't care about. But when we're talking about a business case here this is going to blow out to somewhere in the vicinity of $10 or $12 billion by the time it's finished in 2033. When we've got a hospital that doesn't work, we're short 300 police officers. Some of our schools, kids can't turn the taps on in the toilets because they're rusted shut. We've got potholes in the roads and various other things going wrong. It comes down to an opportunity cost, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, every decision made, I'm not in Cabinet, but I presume every spending decision Cabinet makes is an opportunity cost. But one of the decisions that the Cabinet has kept grappling with and has made this decision about is that buses aren't going to service Canberra into the future as Canberra gets closer to 600,000 people, 700,000 people by 2050. You will need multiple options of transport up and down the spine of the city, and light rail, getting all those buses off the road, being a really, really comfortable and popular means of travel, is a key part of what the government's committed to delivering to service those needs of the city as we get bigger. And you should do it before we get there rather than after we get there.
Yeah, but the cost has still got to stack up.
Absolutely. And that's a decision for government.
The cost has got to stack up, and on your point of congestion, if you look at this business case that has been handed down, it actually shows that congestion will get far worse with light rail because they'll have to remove at least 2 lanes of traffic on Commonwealth Avenue. That's not going to improve congestion. That's just going to make traffic time blow out even more.
All right, let's move on to another issue that's close to home for both of you. The Point Hut dog exercise area. I've never been there, but this has become a massive issue, Tamus.
It's a big one. I've been talking or annoying the government about this since, I think, November. It was one of the first emails that I received from a constituent after getting elected and sort of getting my office up and ready. I think what it looks like is that the government has to square a circle that a special reserve area, which in most places of Canberra, dogs aren't permitted in special reserves area. And this is next to, it's in the Murrumbidgee River corridor, and the Conservator of Land is thinking about whether or not it's worthwhile improving that area. But in the meanwhile, that is now a really, really valuable or valued and well-used unofficial dog exercise area, particularly for large dogs, because there's sort of like a square kilometre of area that they can run around and get the exercise that they need that they can't get in the backyard or on a leash. And so this is, and as Deb, you were running a petition, or you are running a petition on it, and it's got heaps of signatures.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is a hugely important community asset. It's a broad area of land has been used by Lanyon locals for more than 2 decades. We don't actually know how long it's operated as an off-leash dog park, but locals that I've spoken to have been using it for at least 25 years. So it's deeply entrenched within the culture of the Lanyon community. And the ACT government has said that when the new Lanyon dog park opens, which is being built directly adjacent to the existing Point Hut dog exercise area, they've said that when that opens, the existing exercise area will be prohibited to dogs off leash. Now, understandably, people who've been using this area for decades are outraged. They're devastated because it's not just an area where dogs can get out and stretch their legs and exercise. It's an area where people have built community. They've built their lives around the space.
Because, Tamus, am I right in saying that the new one is a lot smaller and is only going to be on leash?
No, the new one's off leash, but it is smaller.
Okay.
It isn't in a special purpose reserve area. And the government, as far as I'm aware, the government hasn't made decisions yet about where off leash areas are going to be permitted still in the special reserve area. Like, that is quite a big space within the Murrumbidgee River corridor. I've been lobbying the government that the area should stay as is, because there's going to be a conversation about the Murrumbidgee River corridor plan in a couple of years. And so there's going to be a really robust conversation within the community about how best to utilise or preserve that area, because dogs aren't a light touch animal. No, bless them, but you can't have a garden and a dog.
All right, so Deb, have we wasted money on this new one then? Should we have just upgraded the existing thing?
Well, I don't see why the 2 dog parks can't coexist. The new dog park represents a 90% reduction in the space that's currently available at the Point Hut dog exercise area. And when the government made updates to the territory plan, they actually prohibited dogs in both areas. So in the new dog park itself and the existing one. So they've had to go back to the drawing board and work out that change that they've made. But the petition that I'm sponsoring, and the principal petitioner, James Sizer, has done an amazing work getting this out into the community. In 2 days, it's received more than 800 signatures. And that just shows you how important this area is for the community and how desperately they want it protected. And I do hope that the government is paying attention and will respond very favourably to that.
So when will you table the petition?
Well, the closing date will be in a few months. So the next sitting after budget, the next sitting period is in September.
Okay.
So there is some time yet, and I do encourage everyone to please jump online and support the Lanyon community by signing this petition.
All right, Tamus, I want to talk about the so-called missing middle. I hate the term, but let's call it that. The missing middle housing.
What would you call it?
Well, medium density. We come up with these catchy terms here in the ACT that mean nothing. But anyway, let's call it the missing middle, because that's what the government wants to call it. But this is what the legislation should have been in the very first place, not to limit people to only building effectively a 2-bedroom granny flat if they had a big block of land. But professional developers are saying, well, this isn't going to entice them to build anything. It's only going to be good for mum and dad investors. And mum and dad investors aren't going to be able to afford to do anything because of the lease variation charge. You've missed the real key point here.
Well, I tend to disagree. I think the lease, from what I understand, this is not my area of expertise, funnily enough, but I don't think the lease variation charge, that is mostly applied to larger developments, right? And I've seen in Gowrie and in Fadden over the past few years a few blocks turned into sort of 3 or 4 townhouses or an apartment area come up. And this sort of thing has been asked of me when I door knock and have a cup of tea with a lovely retired couple who are in a big 4-bedroom house but they don't need it anymore. The kids have moved out. They want to stay in place, particularly in Tuggeranong, because why wouldn't you? But there aren't sort of single-level bungalows that are duplexes or a smaller footprint. That sort of stuff doesn't exist in Tuggeranong. It's 80%
but that's
of the
not
places,
the point. But
big houses.
That's not the point. I mean, we all agree that those kind of dwellings should exist. But if you've got a mum and dad, an older couple who wants to build a smaller dwelling at the back of their 1,200 square metre block, and they've got to pay tens of thousands of dollars, or in some cases over $100,000 in lease variation charge, then they've got to spend $300,000 or $400,000 building the dwelling. Well, who can afford to do that?
Exactly right, Stephen. Let's be very real about what this is. This is not about fixing the missing middle. This is about Labor fixing the missing middle in their budget. Because, as we already know, our budget is in a very dire position at the moment. And if they were serious about improving housing affordability and supply, then they would address issues like lease variation charge, land supplies, approval processes.
But it's not even that, because if nobody does it, they raise no revenue from it.
Well, I mean, yes, exactly. That's a good point too. And we have had developers say that, if you had two properties redeveloped next to each other, the fees and taxes alone would be $200,000.
Yeah.
And that's just, is it any wonder that's unsustainable for so many people?
Tamus, and that's the problem there, because the lease variation charge, if the government was fair income and they wanted to fix the missing middle and the missing middle in their budget, they'd scrap the lease variation charge altogether and just make it like a $200 fee for whatever the paperwork is, and then reap the benefits from the extra rates they're going to get from the second dwelling.
Well, maybe that was part of the conversation about what would be, as we discussed previously, the opportunity cost for doing that. I mean, they are starting a process we are to enable more people to live in our suburbs, in and around our suburbs. You can't maybe just do everything all at once. You start the process and you see where people are coming from and how often or how many lease variations are accessed.
All right. Look, I've got to cut you off there, but the reality is if you put a policy out, you should put the whole policy out. Now, I'm sorry.
Talk about local shops.
Well, I do have to cut you guys short, though, because we've got floods up on the north coast that I need to address.
Right.
So I will come to that after the break. We'll talk to Sue Moore, the Mayor of Singleton. Deb Morris, Tamus Werner-Gibbings. We'll catch up again next week.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Deb.